Hello there. I just wanted to add on this short little tutorial on how to transfer your line art onto your pastel paper. Now, along with the video you're about to watch, you will receive a line art. All you need to do is turn that over, print it off obviously, turn that over, and what I like to use is just a graphite pencil. So this is just an 8B graphite pencil. Now you can use your pastel pencil, you can use a pastel stick or pan pastels, even transfer, specific transfer paper. But I find that just a good old 8B graphite pencil does the trick, and that's what I use the most times in my drawings. So all you want to do is just go over the back of that line art that you've printed off. As long as you've got the area covered that you need to transfer, you don't need to go over the whole lot. But the good thing with the graphite pencil is that they're easily accessible, they're cheap, so yeah, that's why it's my preferred method. So all you're doing is laying down a bit of the graphite on the back of that line art. You're then just going to flip it over and you're going to lay it down in position on your paper. Now I just like to take a little bit of masking tape and I just secure the top corner. Get that a little bit straighter. Top corner, and then a little bit just down the side here. That just holds it in place, but it also allows you to lift it up and check that you're getting everything laid down. All you need to do then is just grab a normal biro. There's a normal pen. I like to use the one with the colours because it just lets you see where you've traced over. And then all you need to do is just go over the top of those lines. Just take your time and you don't have to press too hard. If you press too hard, there's the tendency to dig into your paper, and we don't want any sort of indents on our pastel paper. So as long as you've got a good pressure, you can always, like I said, lift that up and you can see that it's transferring that graphite onto the page. Again, you take your time so that you're getting your lines and everything in the right spot. And just don't forget your little sections in the middle here. And there you have it. We can just remove that now. If you do need to touch up, if there's any graphite sort of gone down onto your paper, you can just use a kneadable eraser. You can get those at any craft shop, and you can just dab that over your paper and it just lifts off any of that excess graphite. Now the same applies if you feel you've pressed a little bit too hard and some of these lines are a bit too dark, you can just dab over the top and that'll just lift some of that pigment off for you as well. So that's the basics on how to get your actual line art transferred onto your paper. So let's get on with the actual tutorial. Welcome to this tutorial. We're going to draw this little eye of a cat. Now this is on the Canson velvet paper, and this is the graphite grey, and the size is about 6 by 6 centimeters. Now I'll attach down below all of the pencils that I've used for this little drawing, so let's get started. Alright, so I'm going to come in first of all with the black, 750. just going to go around the outline. Now I've already transferred my drawing onto the paper, and I've attached a short tutorial for you on how I do that. You just want to go around and just define that black line that's round the eye there. I'm also going to just plot in this little iris here. Or the pupil, sorry, not the iris. I'm also going to come in with the 110, the grey white, and I'm just going to pop in these little reflections. Now you want to put your little reflections, if they're really bright, you don't want to be going over the top of another colour to put those in. You want to keep them nice and bright. I always like to just plot those in first. And then just back with the black, the 750. Again, just going to come out just to where that corner of the eye is. And just down this edge. Nice and dark up above the eye here as well. So I'm just going to come in again, just get that plotted in. It does sort of come into the eye as it comes round. Not quite as dark all the way down. And then I'm just going to take that black and I'm just going to fill this top dark section. You'll notice in the reference photo that there is a lighter line there, just in between the two dark sections of the eye. So we're just going to leave a little space for that. Also down here it's a bit lighter at the top, so I'm just going to put that dark down the bottom. Same on here, you've got these little lighter little section, and then it comes dark into the corner. Again, constantly just checking out the shape of our drawing, always looking at your reference photo. Again, I might just come back in and just really darken down. The top of that eye is nice and dark. But you want to make sure that you're getting that darks in. And down the bottom here too, nice and dark. And then we just want to come in with our blender. So just a paper stump or a Q-tip, and we just want to just push that pigment down into that tooth of the paper. And we just round the edge of the eye, just very gently, just run around that line. You don't want to be dragging too much of that dark into that iris area yet. Okay, so I'm going to start adding some colour. So I'm going to come in first of all with the 690, which is the golden ochre. And I'm just going to put a layer of that across the whole iris to start with. And just in circular motions with your pencil. And every now and again, just rotate that pencil in your hand. And that'll just help keep the point sharper. Again, be very careful coming around these little reflections. We don't want to be getting any of that colour into those. You don't need a lot of pressure. Just a little circular motion until you've filled up that iris. So I might come in now with the 585, which is the olive green. And I'm just going to do the same in the center little section here. I'm just going to add a little bit of that green. Just all the way around. Up this edge. You can see that round the outer part of the eye has got more of that brown sort of ochre sort of colour. I don't want to be pulling too much of the green through the whole thing. And then actually on the eye itself, just at the edge of that pupil, you can see it's got that darker sort of green. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of that just round that little pupil there. Now again, just come back in with our blender, and we just want to gently, just in little circular motions, just going to just gently blend those two colours in together. And just making sure that we're coming right out to the edge of that iris. And just gently blending. Don't want to be pulling out that black, so just be careful. Like so. We might come in now with the 620, so the burnt ochre. And the same thing, just on this outside edge. Again, just little swirls, just where you can see that pattern actually on the eye. And just comes down the bottom here a little bit. I might add a little bit up the top. It is dark up here, but it does have that brown sort of undertone. I'm going to make sure that we get that in now. Again, all the way down. And then again, just back in with that blender. And just motions. Push that pigment down. Now we can come in with a darker colour, 625. That's the burnt umber. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. Just having a good look at the reference. You can see just coming out from this dark. It's just darker little shapes. Down this edge here. So tiny little circular motions. You're not pressing hard. Add a few little squiggles just where we can see some of that pattern. A darker sort of shape just down the bottom there. And then again, it just up this edge. Again, just little swirls, little squiggles. Not pressing hard. And then up in here's a lot darker. Again, just another layer just on top. And then again, just a little blend. You don't want to blend them all together. You're just going over the part that you've done. And just pushing that down into the paper. Like so. I come back in with the black, the 750. And I just want to darken down. This little edge here is quite dark. Just gently, hardly any pressure. Just coming down into that iris. Just a little bit with some of that black pigment. Put a thin little layer just on the top here. And just really soft, just right on that edge. It's just as if that little piece of the eye is just sort of bleeding in into the iris. Again, I want to make sure that we keep that pupil nice and dark. Then we can come back in with that blender and just gently just soften where we've popped that darker colour. And just little dabs. When you've got some pigment on your actual paper stump or your blender, you put that to your advantage. So where you want to darken, I want to just darken down this little stretch here. So while that pigment's on your little blender, just use that to just come in and maybe dab a little bit. You could always come out and pick up a little bit. And again, just adding, so you're not having to put straight pigment down onto your paper. You're actually utilizing what you've already used. I think it's always a good idea, because when you don't want any loose pigment on your page anyway. So if you can utilize some of that you've picked up on your blender, then why not? Again, if you just feel that just some of these little areas, you might just want to put a little dab, a little mark. And there might not be a lot of pigment on your paper stump, so you might not get a lot down. But it's just another little tip just to get that pigment moved around on your paper a bit better. And now the 105, the ivory. And I just want to just lighten up just in between. So again, we're just little circular motions. It is a bit lighter. Adding this pigment down, it just sort of changes that tint of the colours we've put below. Again, just little circles. A little bit lighter, just up and in between some of these little darker sections. Brighten up just along this little edge here. Come in with just a Q-tip or cotton bud. And then again, just on the areas that you've just put down, you just want to blend that slightly, just soften. You don't want any harsh lines, and you don't want any of that pigment just sitting on the surface of your paper. Just a little soften. And then we're going to come in with the 595, the leaf green deep. And I'm just going to add a very, very light glaze of that just up the side of that pupil. And just in between these little reflections, very, very light, thin line in between. And then we can see coming out from the pupil these little sort of lines coming out. Again, just lines. Just have a look at the direction that they're coming out. And the bottom. A little bit more of a browny tinge on this side. I might come back in with that 625, the burnt umber. And the same thing, pulling out these little lines. And you can always just come back in with that Q-tip. You can just press down, and that just softens any of that little pencil strokes you've popped in. You come back in with the 595, the leaf green deep. Again, just little marks. I might even add just the tiniest little glaze of that, just on top, like that. You're hardly even touching the paper. Just little marks, little squiggles. And just adding in those different colours. Then again, just in with that Q-tip or your blender. Again, you just want to soften. You're just giving them a little tap, pushing that pigment down. Then we might come back in with the 105, the ivory. A little bit that just back in and through some of those little lines that we popped in. Brighten that a little bit. And the same with here. Just at the edge of where those little lines are coming out, it is quite light. You can see the little band of just that lighter section in the iris. So again, just really, really gentle. Hardly any pressure at all. And again, just in with our blender. Just give that a little soften. There's a little bit more of that ivory just over here. Again, just up this darker line. Just want it quite light on this side. Over the top of that with a bit of that 585, that olive green. Again, just a little glaze. A little bit of the olive green just in between. Just to change that tint a little bit. Come back in with a 105. I just want to make sure that it's brighter. There's a little highlighted section just coming down, it's just a bit lighter on the eye. In here. And then just come back in with your Q-tip. And just little gentle motions, little swirls. You don't want to be blending it all together. You don't want to be losing that actual structure that you've been working hard to put in there. Again, just look at your reference. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be identical to what's there. You just want to get, that gist of the eye. Then we can come in with our black. We always want to be keeping these darks nice and dark. And you can see at the top of the eye here that it is very, very dark. Again, we might even bring in just a little swirl there with the black just at the top, just again, just to make sure we're keeping that nice and dark. And the same, just want to make sure that our shape of our eye remains accurate. Okay, it's nice and dark over on this edge. Okay, it's pulling in those little darker areas that we can see. And then just in with your blender. Whatever one you like to use. Soften that pigment down. And a little bit of that just out. Just softening that edge of the iris. You don't want it to look harsh. That's what, and having your darks in there is what's going to give your actual eyeball that look of being rounded. Even though, excuse me, even though it's on a flat piece of paper. Come back in with the 625, that burnt umber. I'm just going to darken down. Okay, just any of these little areas. No line down the bottom. A bit more just up the top here. Again, these little marks, little circles. Good look at your reference photo. You want to see where some of those darker little brown sections are sitting in the eye. But under there. And you can just, with little marks, little dots. And then you can just come back in with your blender or your Q-tip. Just again, soften, push that down into the paper. A little bit of blue into these little reflections. So I'm going to use the 435, and you can see the one that's sort of in the actual pupil is quite blue. And then you've got just on the edges up at the top there, just where probably the sky is just reflecting into those. And then again, just come in with your blender and just gently soften, give those a little blend, a little push down into the paper. Now I'm going to come in and actually put some of the fur around the outside, and that just often helps just find your placement of the eye. You can see what colours maybe need to change. So having the fur around it does make a big difference in how you sort of perceive your whole drawing. So I'm going to come in with the 704, the warm grey 3, and I'm just going to pop just a little underpainting of that, just coming up and underneath the eye. And just thinner here, so just watch your reference, see where the shapes change. A little bit, it's quite bright here on this side of the eye, but there is a warmer little section just here. I might just add a little bit of that. And you'll see I'm going in the direction that the fur is going. So always be aware of that. And then I might come in the 720, the cold grey one. And I'll just put down a little underpainting just of that little section. Just coming down. And just out. And always add a little bit of that just over the top and just lighten up that other little section. So it's not quite as browny as down here, not quite as warm. Like so. And then we'll come in with the 708, the warm grey 5. And I'm just going to use it as the underpainting just for this corner. Same with just up and over the top of the eye. Again, you're putting down your base layers. Still try and go in the direction that fur's taking you. Bit darker down the bottom here. Continue to plot in just that 708, and then we'll go over the top of this. There's a bit of the black before we blend, just to darken the colour down. And that's the beauty with the pastel pencils. You can just add a couple of layers and just adjust it and try and get that colour that you're trying to achieve. Grab our black. And in this section here again is quite dark. Again, just a light layer. Again, just going in that direction that that fur is actually traveling. Same down below here. You don't have to put a lot of pigment down. You're just combining those colours. And just out from the corner of the eye, quite dark. But just up this top, you see there's a darker little area there. Tiniest little glaze just in here. And then again, we just want to come in with our blender. Do the darks first. Remember, this is just the underpainting. Pigment down into your paper. And then you can just turn over your blender. And go over, making sure everything's soft and push down. And then into your lighter area. Same thing. Okay. So I'm going to come back into the eye now. And I'm just going to get back into the black. We just want to get these areas as dark as we can. So up the top here of the eye, nice and dark. Same in here. Darker section. Might come in with a little bit of the 706, the warm grey 4. And just where we can see that lighter section that we spoke about around the eye, I'm just going to add a very light little layer of that. Same on these little areas here, you can see it coming up. And this little section here. need to darken that down a little bit. So back in with the black. Just be mindful of your shapes. I'm just going to even get a little glaze of that black just over the top. And we're getting that shape of that little lighter section correct. Again, just round that eye nice and dark. And then if you can see in your reference photo, some of these little sections here got just a little pinky fleshy sort of tone to them. So I'm going to use 642, which is the Carpet Morton Violet Light. I'm just going to come in tiniest little mark. I'm going to tone that one down with a little bit of the grey. And the same here, just going to run just very lightly. Tiniest little bit of that over the top of that grey. This inside little mark is more pinky and the outside one is more blue. So for that outside one, I'm going to come in with a 720, the cold grey one. And I'm just going to add just the tiniest little bit of that there. This little bottom part here is a bit pinky, so I might use that 642, the Carpet Morton. And just a very light glaze of that. Then I want to come back in with that 706, the warm grey 4. Just going to go back over that corner. A little bit just back over the top. And then I'm just going to come in with my Q-tip. And I'm just going to push that pigment down. And here, just a light little press. Now it's a lot darker than how we have it at the moment. So we want to just tone this down. So we come in with the black, the 750, and you just ever so gently just glaze your black just over that lighter section that you've popped in there. You don't want to get rid of it altogether. You're just changing that shade. Same even over on this little edge. Tiniest little bit. Just tweak that colour. And again, round that underside of that, making the eye is really dark. Just make sure you go back and you redefine that line, because that's what's going to make your eye stand out. Same on this side. You need to just tweak this shape or anything of that little highlight and just fix that up with your black. And then you can always just come in with a cotton bud like like I said, you can pick up a bit of that pigment. And you can just come over and just tone that little section down. Again, get some dark down the bottom, so back in with that black. Again, just being mindful. Got some of those little hairs coming out of this darker section. So with that black, ever so gently, just pull, soften that edge, as if those little hairs are just coming out. A bit darker. This little section of the eye here, and this is where tonal value is really important. If you look at your reference photo, you can see that this corner is really dark. And you can see that this little edge here is really dark. But the little line running up in between isn't so much so. So it's still, you still want to have that darker line there, but you don't want to be pressing down and having that real solid dark sort of line, because then you would just have this big border going around your eye. I think this top section here still needs to be darker. So again, just with that black, just come into that part of the iris, and just add a little bit more of that pigment. Maybe just a couple of little bits on this little line here coming down. Maybe just need to be tiny little bit darker. Few little dashes in the eye. Again, just slight little dabs with your pencil. Sometimes just all it needs, just to change that tone of a colour that you've already got on there. And again, just a little soften. Again, could be a little bit softer just up this edge. Soften just underneath. Again, you just get these little hairs coming out. A bit of that pigment out, that darker pigment can still come in and come out into that lighter section. It's 2-5, that's the burnt umber. And I'm just going to pull a few little hairs. You can see it's much more of a browny sort of tint, just in this corner here of the eye, as opposed to above the eye. So again, it's very important to just look at the direction that your fur is sitting. Then I might just come in with the black, the 750. I'm just going to start pulling out some of these darker hairs just coming out and into this top section here. Again, just be mindful of your reference. Watch the direction. Up, add in some of these darker hairs. Again, just little strokes, but keep that pencil moving in your hand. You don't want to be doing just little stop-start, little lines. You want to be going in the direction that the fur is traveling, but you've got to remember that these hairs are crossing over each other. You know, some are pointing downwards, some are pointing upwards. So they're all headed in the one direction, but they are moving. And the same with down here, it sort of curls round the bottom of the eye. So same thing, just you know where those hairs are traveling. You just want to get that feeling of the motion and the depth that's in the actual fur. So just work your way along, just adding in all of those little darker sections. You don't want to be completely covering that little underpainting that we did. We want that colour to be shining through. And then the same here. Again, just little marks. Bring that down. And then just this top section here as well. Again, just having a look at the lengths of the hairs, what direction that they're going. Because you don't want to be putting your dark down in one direction and then try and put lighter ones on the top going in an opposite direction. It's just not going to look realistic. And then we're going to pull some of these darker ones again just down and into that lighter section. Again, being aware of the direction that they're coming in to that actual section of fur. We've got a few just coming out. Again, just softening. Softening the bottom edge of that eye. Just a little bit of that colour coming out. Then we can come in over the top. Going to come in with a 110, the grey white. And I'm going to just start pulling some of these lighter ones. Again, keeping that strokes moving. Keep it nice and fluid. Look at your reference photo. See where those hairs are traveling. What direction are they going in? And down here, it's a little bit lighter. This little edge here, a bit brighter. Again, just let's make sure that the length of those hairs are correct. Underneath, we've got some just coming up and under. Just change direction slightly as they come up into the corner of the eye. I just tone those down just a little bit. I'm just going to come in with that 708, that warm grey 5. I'm just going to ever so gently just glaze over the top. Just tone them down just a little bit. And then with the 706, the warm grey 4, just going to pull thinner little section here. And then we might just come back in with that 110. And the same thing, just looking at your reference. And then just popping in those little hairs. And then at the top here, keep pulling some of these little grey hairs. Again, remember, move pencil. Making sure we're looking at where those hairs are going. You've got ones that are coming out from the eye here. The direction. And this isn't a fur tutorial, this is an eye tutorial. But I think it's important to see how the fur around your eye changes how you perceive the eye. Because standing alone is one thing, but you've got to remember that the fur and everything around about your eye makes all the difference to your actual finished product. So I like to start with my eyes, because I think the eyes, it just, every time you look at your artwork moving forward, it's a pleasure to sit down and draw, because you've got these little soulful eyes just looking back at you. So wherever possible, I certainly go in with the eyes first, but then I'll stop and I'll do the area around the eyes, the fur, etc. And then I'll always come back, especially right at the end. And once you see the whole portrait with your eyes in place, that's when you can start to see exactly little tweaks that you need to make to maybe the colours or just your tonal values, what needs to be lightened up, what needs to be darkened down. So don't get too hung up on doing this little fur section. Like I say, this is not a tutorial on fur, but it's nice to actually have that fur around your eye, just for your own benefit. And by all means, take a little bit longer on your fur than I'm doing here, because all you're really doing is just building up those lights and those darks. So you can just come back in with your 750, your black, and again, just come into those little sections that just need to be a little bit darker. You need to add a few more darker little strokes, any little sections. If you've got a bigger sort of lump, you can put a few strokes together. But just, like I said, spend a little bit of time on your fur if you'd like to. And just building up, you're building up the texture with your layers. We're not using a lot of colours in this tutorial, but if you do have other colours that you think would suit the fur, then by all means, get in there, have a bit of a practice. Now, just as it's coming out of the eye here again, I'm just redefining that. I'm adding just a few of those little darker hairs just coming out. And making sure I've got that shape pretty close. Again, we can pull some of those darker ones just out and through. In between. And darker. Where some of those hairs are coming out just from under the eye there. Sorry, above the eye, but in that sort of little recess, the little, I suppose, little eyelid, and that little socket. Just make sure everything's soft. It is pulling things out, little hairs out. Again, if you feel that you need to just go over the top, if there's any sort of little grainy sections, then just take your Q-tip or your blender and you can just come over and just a little dab just lifts that excess pastel off the top of the paper. This little corner here needs to be a little bit darker. So I'm just going to just come in with that black 750 and just darken down in between. Actually got quite a bluey tinge on top of that lighter colour. So I'm going to come in with the 435. I'm just going to add the tiniest bit of blue And then I might just run that black just over the top. Again, you're just playing about with it so that you can get that change in colour. It doesn't look too bad. Just going to, again, just having a look at the reference. I'm not too stressed about this fur, remember. But now we want to have a good look at the actual eye itself. Now, colour-wise, I'm pretty happy with that. But what we need to do now is, and we do this at the end of every portrait that we do, is you evaluate your lights and your darks. And that's what we mean by our tonal values. So I'm going to, although it's not fur related, I'm going to darken down this little section here, which we can see in our reference is a little bit darker. We've then got that lighter section there, and then we're dark again here. Now, the same applies for your eye. You want to make sure that any section around your eye is nice and dark. You always want your pupil to be nice and dark. So I like to come in at the end with a dark charcoal pencil. So any brand will do, just make sure it's the dark charcoal, because you can get light and medium. And I always find that this is the darkest black. So you don't want to be putting this everywhere. This is where you really want that darks to pop. So in the instance of this little eye here, we definitely want it up the top of the eye. This little corner here, you can see that it is dark. Then you're lighter, like we discussed, and then you're darker again as it comes down here. And by putting in these darks, that's what's going to make that little eyeball just lift itself off the page and make it look like it's actually a rounded shape, when in fact it's just completely flat. So just come in with a dark charcoal. If you don't have a dark charcoal, don't worry. You can just come back over again with your black. Again with this little edge here. And then I want this bottom. And then just make sure we're coming up around the edge of the eye. This top section here, again, just above that little lighter area in the eye. Again, just make sure that's nice and dark. And then also you can see little breaks just in between some of that little lighter section. But just a few little spots. You wouldn't think it was much, but it's these little sort of final details that just make all the difference. Again, it's nice and dark down here. I think we need to darken down that little line, so I'm just going to glaze ever so gently just over the top, just to tone that down. And this little corner, again, nice and dark. Now, if you were doing this as more of a full portrait, and that you were having a look at your fur and everything as well, then obviously you would do exactly the same with your fur. You'd be looking at your reference and you'd be seeing where some darker areas need to go. So you would do the same thing. You would come in with your charcoal pencil and you would just pick just a few little flourishes Again, you don't want to be doing this everywhere. This is just your final little touches to bring out the darkest areas in your actual portrait. And exactly the same applies to the whites. And again, I really enjoy coming in just with a charcoal white, or if you don't have that, like I said, any really sort of bright white that you've got. And I like to keep, wherever possible, whites until right at the end. So even here, this was a grey white we used here. We didn't go straight in with white, because once you've got your white in, you can't get brighter than the white. So even now, you could come in just with your white pencil. That would probably be sufficient. So the 100, the titanium white, and I would just come in and just, for example, just in the center of those little highlights, you could come in with just a little bit of that white. You've got to also just note any little highlights, little watermarks that you get in eyes. And over on this corner, we've got a little tiny one there. So I'm going to pop that in with the 435. So just a little mark. Down here, we've got one as well. So again, just tiny little mark there. And we can see a little line running down here, a little reflection. And you'll find when you look at any sort of eyes, wherever you've got the top reflection, there's usually always a light source hits the bottom, because that's just the nature of the curvature of the eye. So always look out for that. So opposite this one here, you can see there's just that little line running along. It's very, very thin. So we just take our white, and again, you just want to be very careful. It's slightly broken, the lines, so just little dashes, little lines. Just pick up that little light source down the bottom. And then just final little touches. You can just bring out a little bit more of these little hairs. It's coming out from under the eye. Again, you just want to get that eye framed with your fur. Focusing more on actually getting that shape correct, getting those tonal values right, making sure we're getting these little lines, any little swirls in the eye. But overall, I don't think that's looking too bad. So the only thing you really need to do now is just get yourself a nice sharp pencil. I'm just going to give mine a little sharpen. And then you can just pop your initials or your signature next to your beautiful cat eye. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that tutorial and it's been helpful for you. And if you would like to join me in creating other realistic pet and wildlife drawings, then please join our Whiskers to Wildlife Academy waitlist to be the first to know when the membership doors reopen. In the meantime, happy pasteling.